I was finishing my second year of Thrive, and I really didn't know what was next. If you listen to my podcast from last week, you got to hear a little bit about my story in Thrive, and this is kind of the part two, what happened after. And so basically what was happening was while I was in Thrive, I was answering two questions. Did I want to work in ministry full time? And I wanted to improve as a drummer. Those were could I improve as a drummer? Those were kind of the two main things I was working on. And what I also kind of wanted to find out was I good enough as a drummer to be given more responsibility to grow in that capacity. And while I was finishing my second year of Thrive, this was probably March or April of 2018. I'm kind of wondering, man, I've just invested these 2 years of my life into this program and gotten a lot better at playing drums, but I don't really know where this goes. I knew I wanted to stay in Sacramento because I just developed some incredible friendships and was growing in a really valuable way where I felt like leaving, I was going to lose more than I was going to gain. And as I was thinking through these options of where to work and where I should go to school and what were the next steps in my life, there was actually this sermon that was on the topic of giving. Now, anytime there's giving or money in church, things can be weird. Let's just be honest. And at the same time, I just decided to pray this simple prayer. And at the time, I want to say I had I think I had about $700 in my bank account at the time. And I went, this was my simple prayer, was, hey, I'm gonna give $100, which feels like a ton of money when it's a seventh of all the money that you have. And what I asked for in return was $1,000. And I don't know if that's totally right or wrong to do, but that was kind of the challenge. And what was really amazing to me was 3 days later, I got a text from someone I had never met before that said, hey, I work at a church in the local area and I've been given your name, would love to meet for lunch and find out if you'd be a good fit. And so that was a text I got from Dan DeMuri in 2018, and it was amazing because some of the people that I'd worked with in Thrive, I was in Thrive, they worked at Bayside, and Francis was, I think, one of the main people that recommended me, but also Luke Elrod and Zach Foster, and because they had worked with Dan at another church, and so it was just it was cool because they didn't just want me to be there as a drummer, but they also wanted me to be able to improve in and develop in other leadership capacities. And so I actually got to go to lunch at a place called Jack's Urban Eats, and I remember I got a mushroom burger. I love mushrooms, so that's a fun fact. And really the biggest needs were someone who could play drums and keep time. That was the biggest challenge that they were facing at that point in terms of the worship experience at Vintage. And they were also looking for someone who could build relationships with other drummers and other volunteers. And I was someone who I could do that. I love people, I love meeting people and getting to know them better. And so I was really excited. And so I decided to do that and started working at Vintage. And at the time we had 3 services, 2 in the morning, 1 at night. And then we pretty quickly moved to 3. I can't remember exactly the timeline of if it was 3. Yeah, it moved to 4 pretty quickly. And so it ended up being a total of almost 10-hour days on Sunday between the 3 services in the morning, and then so you had rehearsal, 3 services, then rehearsal again, and then 1 more service because sometimes band members would switch. And then during that time, that summer of 2018, I was also working full-time in San Francisco and then commuting back. Well, I was living here, but sort of living in San Francisco full-time Monday through Friday, driving back doing stuff on Saturday and then working all day Sunday. I'm going to do, next week's podcast will be a story about that and just all the stuff that happened in that and how that came about. And while I was working at Vintage Grace, I loved playing drums there. I started to have other responsibility and was thinking about doing things in more the production side of that church. And one of the things that was really kind of a challenge was my technical, like I understood things intellectually, but I wasn't super great at understanding the room that I was in specifically. And so as I kind of shifted into that role, the worship pastors also changed, and the worship pastor I had been working with had a really strong technical background. So the things that I wasn't super great at, he could fill in. And the last worship pastor that I was working with, Jason, he was a little less good at that specific room because he hadn't built it. So it made a lot of sense. And the thing was, though, is I was not good enough at the time to really be able to take on that responsibility. And so things ended up like I just didn't do super great at that role. And that's just me being honest. And it was kind of the first time where I was like, man, I just kept I kept on missing things, or like not being well enough, like trying to prepare, but then there were just things that my knowledge was lacking in. And it was really kind of one of the first times where I went, wow, this is really not fun. Like I wasn't enjoying it. I was actually, there was a point where I was almost dreading Sundays because I was like, something's going to go wrong and I'm not going to have the knowledge to really be able to fix it quickly. And that's really not fun when you're like in a position but unable to do it well. And yeah, that was not a super fun period of time. And I was grateful for Jason also, in that like I for sure noticed and he noticed, and so we started talking and going like, hey, is this the best fit for you? Like, is there something else that we can transition, or someone else like we know? So I was really grateful for both the grace and the willingness to go, how do we make this better? We know that you can do this. How do we partner with you? And yeah, I was just so grateful for that support from him and from VG as a whole. And then next I was able to actually kind of transition out of that, started working a little bit less hours post-COVID. Was that post-COVID? When was that? Let's see, because I was there in 2020. All during COVID, we moved stuff into, we shot, it was only 3 of us, me, Jason, and Drew, for like a couple weeks. We also moved all the stuff into Drew's house for a while to shoot there. Jason McCarty was super helpful in doing all that stuff. And then we moved back. I actually remember moving all the computers and everything back. It was raining. And this was all during COVID. And then I went down to less hours because Jason McCarty was able to help again, which that was such a relief for me to have someone who knew the space better than I did there to help with just the areas where my gaps were too large and my ability just wasn't there. And so that was kind of the biggest, I would say, the conflict or challenge while I was at Vintage. And one of the things that kind of shifted from that point was I was able to start helping Michael Dacey with some of the communications and the podcast and shooting story videos. And I realized, man, I love sharing stories, my own stories, other people's stories. And that is actually a part of what gave me the confidence and the knowledge base to go, oh, I ended up helping produce a podcast at Vintage, and that was one of the reasons why I knew I could make my own podcast, was because I went, well, I just done it for 6 months with someone else's podcast. I can do it myself. And so that was a big win. Something else was I just learned so much more about what I did and didn't want. And I realized that although I loved working at a church, I also knew that wasn't what I wanted to do forever. And because of that, I was able to actually choose to leave when I went to Ecuador. And one of the things that I have learned how to do is to leave places really well. And I mean, some of that's dependent on me, but some of it's dependent on the environment. And when I did tell Daisy and Jason that I was planning to go to Ecuador for 2 to 3 months, and I didn't know if I was going to come back, I was so grateful for how well received it was, and also how supportive they were of that place that God was inviting me into, and that they were so excited for me. Like, that blew me away, that people that were gonna have to figure out how to, find a drummer or find someone else to do these different roles, that they were so excited for me to do this thing that I've wanted to do for 7 or 8 years. Like, it really just blew my mind. And yeah, being able to leave a place so loved and so cared for and encouraged, and being told that, like, hey, you're doing the right thing by choosing to do this, it was incredible. And yeah, I was so grateful for that. And also, I think one of the other things that I realized too was, in addition to telling stories, I also loved building people. I got to specifically help and train some of the drummers that are now volunteering more consistently at Vintage, and help them understand some of the dynamics and ways that playing drums in a worship context is different from other environments. And there's certain things that are really intuitive to me because I did Thrive, that they were kind of just like imprinted, or it's not burned, branded into who I am and how I do things as a drummer. And getting to then take those things apart and then realize what I'm doing and then put them back together in other people, that was a really cool thing. And I loved, I just got to shout him out, Sam. He grew so much. It was just, it gave me almost more joy to watch him play drums and see him improve and be more confident than it did me playing drums myself. And yeah, there would just be times where, like, he would be playing and I would be somewhere else on campus, and then hear him like do something where I'm like, that was me. Like, I remember sharing, like, oh, hey, this is a concept you want to implement, and then like actually hearing him do it and then run with it and take it further. Yeah, has brought me so much joy to just see how other drummers that are open to that feedback and to that, to my way of thinking and playing, it's been really cool. So yeah, it was a man. I was also grateful for it because if I wouldn't have chosen to leave that really good place, I might not be sharing this with you. And I also wouldn't have this this painting, because that came from Ecuador. And yeah, it can be really tough to leave something good when the next thing is unknown. And I'm realizing that choosing to release even good things can create the space for even better things, and for sure a lot of growth internally. So I just want to say thank you so much for listening. If you've made it this far, please leave a like or a rating, 5 stars preferably, on whatever the platform is that you choose to listen on. And I just want to say that I hope that we become people who live by faith, are known by love, and are voices of hope. That we become people who dream great dreams and have the courage to go after them. My name is Daniel Barnes. I'll talk to you later. Adios.